All NCAA seniors getting another year of eligibility. But how hard is the decision to make? Find out in the next episode of Sideline Sports Podcast. Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. I am the host, Alex Naveja, and if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. We welcome you all back to another edition of Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, and of course, if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. And of course, your source for all SoCal sports. You're talking Lakers, Dodgers, all of the sports. And with me today is former 22 West sports director and now freelance broadcaster Brent Pothoven. And of course, Brent, congratulations on graduating at Long Beach State. It's a pleasure to have you back on the show. How you doing, man?
The world is completely ending while I graduated, so that's great. All the fun times. It was a little abrupt having everything kind of end so quickly. I mean, obviously we were in the middle of the Big West tournament when that happened, but in the end, a college degree is a college degree, so that's kind of nice.
That is pretty nice. You get yourself a bachelor's degree there, and now the real journey begins for you, Brent. But of course, let's get started. And lately we've been having some NCAA baseball players come on. I mean, a couple months ago, we had Jacob Huey, the first baseman and designated hitter for Long Beach State. We had the catcher for Cal State San Marcos come on. And last week, we had the Dirtbags head coach, Eric Valenzuela. Now, Brent, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on this extra year of eligibility for the seniors? I mean, it's clearly, okay, yeah, let's take another year of eligibility. But of course, it's a pretty tough decision if you're a senior, I would say.
Well, it's a tough decision for a lot of people involved, if you think about it. Because here's the thing, most of those players generally are on scholarship. And when they come back, those scholarships are going to be taken. That's the general gist of it. In fact, the Los Angeles Times is saying a lot of them will not have their scholarships, or even less, and a lot of them will have to pay out of pocket, which will make it a lot harder for a lot of these players. So the question is, it's not just the conversation with the coach of, can I come back? Do you have someone taking my spot? Or stuff like that. It's also, can I afford to come back? And that's a big deal as well. I don't know if that played a factor in someone like Jacob Huey coming back, but no matter what, it's still one of those things where it's tough. It's a really difficult decision to make because, a lot of these players want to end it on a better note. I mean, their season got pulled at the end. I mean, if you talk about the Dirtbags were on their way to Tulane for a really big series. They were actually in New Orleans when this thing happened. And actually had to fly. They flew in that day, had to fly back that night. So a lot of things kind of got uprooted, and that's going to be a real big curiosity what we see coming up next. I mean, obviously the Dirtbags had one quick answer, but the other thing about it is you got to think about other sports as well. Softball got interrupted, water polo got interrupted. A few places that there's not a lot of scholarships going around. Can those players afford an extra year of college? And can they get there in a way that works? I mean, if you think about it, the Long Beach State softball team is actually one of the last teams to play a game. Their game was actually ended during the game. So there's a lot of questions. And you look at that softball team, they have a lot of seniors, especially on the pitching staff. So it's a very big question for so many colleges now, more so than just the big ones like basketball. Which obviously they probably won't get that because they were a fall sport. But spring sports are going to be really concerned about this.
I'm actually pretty shocked right now, Brent. I know you didn't really get to see my facial expression, but I was sincerely shocked when you told me that the softball game was interrupted in the middle of the game because of the whole entire COVID, the whole entire pandemic going on right now. But Long Beach State, like you're talking about it, they were one of the teams in the Big West that are getting it going. CSUN, another one, UC Santa Barbara, a case as well, even UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton also was supposed to be a case this year in the Big West Conference. And it's just real unfortunate just to see all of these teams and all of these sports getting cut short. And another thing I wanted to
Look at
ask...
volleyball.
Men's volleyball, too. I mean, Long Beach State, who knows, maybe, potentially, 3-peat.
Hawaii, Davis, like all these really good teams were in the Big West. I mean, there was a good shot for a lot of those to win a national title. So it's insane how a lot of these teams probably got that taken away. And, you know, while Long Beach has one advantage, they only have like one senior on the volleyball team. It's still one of those things where it's got to stink for a lot of those players. And that's a big question: is can they come back, because they weren't planning on it, and now they kind of have to think about it. It was a crazy year for this to happen, but it's going to be even crazier to see how they handle it next season.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how these spring sports are going to come back from, you know, just playing maybe 15 games. Or volleyball was a little deeper than baseball and softball. But, you know, the bigger question for all of these seniors that are getting another year of eligibility is, okay, you're a senior, you finished school. Now, if you want to come back, do you get a minor in something? Do you major in something else to try to get that extra year of eligibility? I just feel like it's a gamble, Brent. I feel like you're really gambling on that year. And should I go for this extra year of eligibility and go for the draft, or should I focus on my career?
That's true, too, because there was one of those things where when this happened, I forgot which player it was, one of the Long Beach State dirtbag players actually suggested that teaching credential students should be able to go in, which I myself am a teaching credential student, but it's one of those things where if you look at it, like the big thing is also like is teams affording the players back with these scholarships, because the financial aid has been adjusted to carry more players on scholarships. But yeah, it's like if you come back, do you have to get a minor? Do you have to take classes? Because that's another thing. You have to be a student, so you just go and, you know, take the most BS class you can find, you know, take that class you wanted to take but never took, you know, find, you know what, banana tattooing. It's a curiosity. Like, do you just take 5 classes of bowling? Like, I don't know.
It's such a tough decision to be that senior and to just really try to gamble. Am I really going to try to go for this draft that's only going to be 5 rounds that, you know, maybe smaller conferences or maybe even, you know, D2, D3 programs? What do you do? You know, what should I do? It's a tough decision to be a senior. I mean, we talked about it last week that Jacob Huey, he hung up the cleats, and, you know, before we even started recording, Brent, you said you don't see a college player retiring. How often do you see that?
I only see it with injury. Like, literally, it's the only time I think we've ever seen it is injury. And even then, it's not like a formal retirement. It's just like, hey, I can't play anymore. But, like, Huey literally retired because he was going to play a 6th year in college. And, you know, I personally think if Huey had played one more year, he'd probably be in the MLB next year. But I just don't think that was in the cards. Maybe the passion wasn't there or something. You know, yeah, you know, you have a lot of time to think right now. And, you know, maybe that's just what he decided he didn't want to do. But in the end, it's hard for a lot of these players because a lot of players who would have been drafted, because remember, there's a ton of rounds and draft picks in baseball, and now there's way less. I mean, that's why they were fighting so hard to get 10 rounds instead of 5. It's, you know, these teams need to like funnel through and recycle these minor league systems, and they're going to have to do it even more because of how COVID's affecting all these players. I mean, players are getting cut left and right. I'm amazed they actually cut the draft down just because of this.
And even then, you said it right, Brent. The minor leagues even getting cut down and really not even being able to have a season. And it's just really real unfortunate to see these players not even get paid. I don't know if you saw, Brent, but there's been some headlines that some major league players have been donating to minor league players to try to help them even like stay alive and help them pay for bills and even just, you know, live their everyday lives.
Ain't that fun when the millionaires are doing what the billionaires are supposed to do?
Right.
Hey, David Price, man. David Price made that trade the David Price trade now, man. Forget Mookie Betts. Except let's not forget Mookie Betts' contract season comes up, though. Come on. Let's when free agency comes up, it's the Mookie Betts trade again.
Hey, well, who knows? Who knows what can happen? But you know what, Brent? We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about these seniors getting another year of eligibility. Make sure to stay tuned, because if you're not on the sideline, it's not a Sideline Sports Podcast. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Andrew Garcia, the catcher for the Cal State San Marcos Cougars, and you're watching Sideline Sports Podcast. Enjoy.
Welcome back to Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, and again with me is Brent Pothoven, former 22 West Media Sports Director and now freelance broadcaster. First half, we were talking a little bit about seniors getting another year of eligibility and what their decision should be and how much of a tough decision it is to be an NCAA player and being a senior. And now I just want to talk, Brent, before we even started to talk about this, or even started talking before recording, you mentioned a little bit about how men's volleyball was going to have their finals and how everything got canceled.
Yeah, so men's volleyball does things a little differently than the NCAA, for example, or than like basketball teams, for example. They have their final in one location. They generally have a tournament kind of in one singular location. So last year it was actually at Long Beach State in the Pyramid. Christian was there. I was there for the semifinal game, and I was there for the final at UCLA. And they moved that around throughout the country, normally to volleyball schools. So this year actually was going to be in Virginia at George Mason. And that's another thing, because now that everything's been canceled, the question now is going to be what's going to happen with that, because they have commitments for the next 2 years. I wonder if they're going to just keep that commitment and then move the third year after UCLA, because next year's is in Ohio State in Columbus, and then the other one is at Poly Pavilion UCLA. I imagine after that they probably would have came back to Long Beach, and kind of just run a circuit of teams that are winning, and maybe I think later go to the Stan Sheriff Center. I think the logistics of getting to Hawaii might have been a problem, but other than that, I won't be surprised if they skip Virginia this year and go in 3 years. But it's still a big question mark of places like that, singular locations, because obviously the College World Series, that's in the same place every year. So you don't have to worry about that as much. The NCAA, the actual big tournament for the basketball team, that moves around a bit, so I wonder about that as well. There's a lot of logistical things that COVID really messed around with. So it's going to be a really weird situation for the NCAA and for these colleges to reorganize. And if you think about it, even from the Big West perspective, the Big West now has logistical problems because it just got bigger. So that could be a curiosity too, because we might still be in quarantine when the fall season starts. I mean, because it's already been confirmed that the colleges here, like Cal State Long Beach, for example, will not have in-person classes next semester.
Yeah, even Division II sports have even been pushed forward. I mean, there's no word of when fall sports for Division II is even going to start. I know Division I and Division III haven't really released anything, but it's been really tough right now. And you know what? They're anticipating that college football is still going to happen, but even an NFL season. But I mean, I know there's still a ways to go, but I mean, there's just still so many things up in the air. I mean, it's a really tough decision. Even high school football, like are we still going to have a high school football season? Like there's just so many things to still have to talk about.
Well, it's crazy because if you think about it, like there's logistical issues with sports like football and basketball that in volleyball volleyball you might be able to keep some distance against players for women's volleyball. For example, the other team is separated by a net. They're generally 6 feet apart. The players themselves, as long as they're tested, I think they can play on the same team together. And there's not a huge requirement for officiating. There's only like 3 referees, so that can work out. Football might be a little more complex because there's a lot more people involved. You have to have, maybe you have like one of the coaches move the chains, but even then, can you trust the coach to move the chains? So there's a lot of curiosity with that and how they're going to do that, because you need a decent amount of referees in football. Do you, for example, do you kill replays so you can have one less person there? There's a lot of questions you have to answer there. And like I said, this is all a logistical thing now. when you're going into this, I mean, testing is a big thing. You know, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, Chris Sylvester, about it just briefly on Twitter, and I mentioned about how I feel like fall sports comes back. I feel like as long as testing is kind of readily available in the cities they're playing in, like Long Beach, for example, has free testing. It won't be that hard to get tests in Long Beach. But other teams might have a little harder of a time getting it. Bakersfield, for example, might be a little more challenging, who are entering the Big West now. They might be more challenging, but you know, President Connolly liked that tweet, so I feel like we're going to have sports no matter what. It's just how we do it. I said there's no chance we have fans, but the question is going to be keeping everyone safe and keeping the number of people to a minimum. I mean, obviously you'll have media relations there. Roger and Lindy will have to be around and stuff like that, but when it comes down to it, it's like, how do you limit everything? Like, obviously, do you let the journalists in? Because, like, 562 Sports was in the Big West tournament. They were actually at the women's basketball game. They were the only media, I think, allowed, besides the play-by-play and Nick Wright and the play-by-play for Cal Poly. So that's the big question as well, is how do you judge importance? How do you judge, okay, we got to separate people. Maybe they put, like, an extra table out there and keep people even more distant. I don't know. It's going to be a challenge. And it's something we're going to have to wait to see for, but we don't got a ton of time left. Because, like, for example, soccer begins in August, if I remember correctly. And if that happens, I mean, soccer is also a sport you have to be concerned about. Because soccer, you don't always stay 6 feet apart, man.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that soccer is almost like it's another very close contact sport. So that's going to be something that's going to have to be talked about. I mean, the referees, they keep their distance, but they sometimes are inside of the action on the pitch. And but a lot of questions.
They got to have a bigger yellow card so the players can see it from farther away. It's going to have a big, like, yellow card. It's going to hold up like a car. Like, you know how, like, fans have the two-hand signs they'll have in the stands? It'd be like that.
Yeah, the big old yellow cards lifting them up.
Yeah, just a big old yellow piece of cardboard.
That's hilarious. Brent.
Yeah, it's going to be something like that.
Brent, I wanted to ask you, so with this whole seniors getting the extra year of eligibility, what decision would you make? Would you take that extra year of eligibility and gamble and try to make that attempt at reaching the draft? You know, if you're a baseball player, or should you just, you know what, like Jacob Huey, let's hang up the cleats, it's done?
That's the question you got to have, is were you prepared for life after the sport as well? Because, so let's say you're all in on it. Like, for example, a friend of mine on the Mariners, JP Crawford, you know, he knew full well he was going to the majors. He knew no matter what happened, like, if he didn't get drafted in high school, he was going to college, he'd get drafted there. Now, his draft stock was highest in high school, so he went in high school. But one of the things that you got to look at is, like, okay, like, you don't have an agent. That's the other big thing. You don't have an agent because you haven't left yet, technically. You can't, and I think you can hire one and fire them if you need to come back. But that's the thing. You don't fully know unless a team's outright told you that we're probably going to draft you. So, you know, if I heard from teams that they would have probably drafted me in, like, the first, like, 10 rounds and I'm a baseball player, I might come back. Like, if I know I have a good chance of coming back, of getting drafted, I'll go back. But the other thing you got to think about is, hey, like, people that get drafted through late rounds, you don't really see them ever again in the MLB. Like, you see them in the minors, and depending on where you're at in the minors, that doesn't pay the bills all the time. So that's why I think people like Jacob Huey looked at that and were like, okay, if I am in Double-A the rest of my career, I will not be making ends meet. I need to find a way to live my life. So it would be a tough decision. I mean, in the end, I think I would still try, because one more year of college sports, I mean, you don't get that many years of it. So one more year of it, especially if you're enjoying it, I would do one more year. Personally, I would do one more year. But it would be a hard decision. Because, you know, there's a good chance that, hey, you might even have to transfer. There's a lot of options there. Because, you know, what happens if, you know, the coach already has your spot given up to someone else, you know? Can't be two first basemen at the same time. So I'm putting myself at first base, by the way, because I don't want to do much running. but I also don't want to squat down like a catcher, so I'm not doing that neither. So, I'm just not putting myself in outfield because you don't need my slow self being out there. I'm trying to help the team here. So it's hard to do. It's hard to make that decision. So going with that, I would probably give it one more year just because of that. But it's, like I said, it's challenging because you got so many variables. I mean, if you're this close in basketball, which I know basketball won't get that eligibility, I mean, you could fight and get there and you'll have a career most likely. Baseball, if you get drafted, you're not guaranteed a career.
It is tougher because you have to maneuver your ways through the minor leagues. And the standard is you will get called up in 2 years, but there's been a lot of stories. Guys don't get called up for 4 years, 6 years. I mean, sometimes there's 30-year-old guys getting called up. I mean, look at Max Muncy. I mean, he's a 30-year-old and he's playing for the Dodgers, but look at what a successful career that he's had so far in the major leagues. So it's just a tough situation to be in, to go back to school, play another year, or okay, I graduated with my bachelor's in whatever the field may be, and just getting into your career and just go through with it.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it as well. Like, just knowing Jay for years, Jay played a couple of years in AA for the Phillies, and when he was doing that, he was telling me, he's like, I was saying, it's not that bad, because, signing bonus and all that. He's like, yeah, but a lot of people I know don't have signing bonuses, man. I was drafted first round. And he said a lot of people out there, they're barely surviving, man. It's just, it's hard to do. It's hard to make it in the minor league, especially at lower levels. So it's a hard question there. I mean, for example, in a lot of minor leagues, your housing is normally provided, which is a blessing because even if you live out in Lancaster, for the Jethawks, I think they're called. Shout out to our boy Jason Schwartz who commentated for him. But with that, it's hard.
Well, that just about does it here at Sideline Sports Podcast. I just want to thank you all so much for tuning into this episode, and of course, thank you all to all of the healthcare workers out there still risking their lives every day to provide healthcare to all the COVID-19 patients. We all tip our caps and the Sideline Sports Podcast crew to each and every one of you guys. And of course, if you guys like this episode of Sideline Sports Podcast, give this episode a thumbs up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well. We've got some great guests like Brent Pothoven coming into the podcast, and who knows? You never know who you're going to get here on Sideline Sports Podcast. And of course, thank you so much to Mr. Brent Pothoven, the former 22 West Media Sports Director and now freelance broadcaster. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Brent. Absolutely a pleasure to always have you on.
Definitely, man. Thank you, and hire me.
Well, hey, there's always a job for you here in Sideline Sports Podcast. And of course, if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. Have a good one, everybody. And of course, this is your source for SoCal Sports.